In this short video, we aim to raise awareness of some of the risks you might face in this area of your work. If you go on to identify a risk to your health and safety, and you are not sure how to control that risk, be sure to talk with your on-site health and safety coordinator.
Fire safety awareness for fire wardens. Fires and explosions are major causes of injury and property damage in the motor vehicle industry. This video will take you through the key elements of fire safety awareness for fire wardens and the issues that you may come across. Knowing how to identify a fire risk and what action you should take in the event of a fire will help protect you, your colleagues and visitors from the devastating effects of fire. The topics we will cover in this video are: what is fire? The hazards associated with fire. The fire triangle. Dangerous substances. How fire spreads. Classifying fire and the use of fire extinguishers. Fire safety signs and notices. Fire safety controls. When to raise the alarm and human behaviour. What to do in the event of a fire. Reducing the risk of fire in your workplace. Do's and don'ts. The role of the fire warden. Legislation. And examples of what can happen when it all goes wrong. So what is fire? Fire is an oxidation process that happens very fast, so that light, heat and sound are released. This sudden release of energy causes temperatures to rise, sometimes by thousands of degrees, and it also results in the production of smoke. Fire can result from a number of common causes. These can include mishandling fuel, for example when draining fuel tanks and lines, carrying out welding on vehicle fuel tanks and waste oil storage tanks, the inappropriate use of paint, thinners or petrol to light fires, electrical faults, and of course arson. The hazards associated with fire. 1. Flames and heat. These can sear and burn the body, particularly the skin. 2. Smoke. This replaces oxygen in the lungs and can damage the whole respiratory system. Depending on what material is on fire, smoke can produce poisonous gases such as carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, hydrogen cyanide and hydrogen chloride. Please be aware that smoke can get very hot, up to 1000 degrees Celsius. 3. Reduced oxygen. This makes breathing difficult, resulting in asphyxiation due to the lack of oxygen in the air. And 4. Property damage. For example, the collapse of buildings and other parts that can crush and kill people. You need to be aware that building damage due to fires and the business disruption that results can sometimes mean that businesses do not survive the devastating effects of the fire. This is because of the huge financial burden and the time taken to re-establish the business. Now let's think about the fire triangle. In simple terms, fire is made up of 3 elements and is often referred to as the fire triangle. These elements are fuel, a source of ignition or heat, and oxygen. Technically, a 4th element, a chemical chain reaction, is also a necessary component of fire, and you may find the traditional fire triangle also referred to as a fire tetrahedron or a pyramid to reflect this 4th element. Essentially, all 4 elements must be present for fire to occur: fuel, heat, oxygen, and a chemical chain reaction. Removal of any one of these essential elements will result in the fire being extinguished. Sources of fuel can include petrol, diesel, waste engine oil, paints, thinners, wood, paper, plastic, rubber or foam, loose packaging materials, rubbish, furniture, and flammable gases, for example acetylene. Sources of heat can include heaters, lighting, naked flames, electrical equipment, smokers' materials such as cigarettes and matches, battery charging units, and anything else that can get hot or cause sparks. And sources of oxygen include the air around us, oxygen cylinders, and certain chemicals. Dangerous substances found in the motor industry. Explosive atmospheres can be caused by flammable gases, mists or vapours, or by combustible dusts. If there is enough of a substance, when mixed with air, all it needs to cause an explosion is a source of ignition. Every year, people are injured in the motor vehicle industry by flammable substances accidentally catching fire or exploding. Work which involves using or creating chemicals, vapours, liquids, gases, solids or dusts that can readily burn or explode is hazardous. Liquids. Liquids such as petrol and other fuels and solvents, such as some paints and thinners, give off flammable vapour which, when mixed with air, can ignite or explode. Flammable liquids are classed as follows. Extremely flammable. For example, spray grease, some paints, especially aerosol paints. Highly flammable. For example, petrol, paints, thinners, and gun wash solution. And flammable. For example, diesel, some polishes, and cleaning or valeting products. Dusts. Dusts which can form explosive atmospheres are also classed as dangerous substances. Dust can be produced from everyday materials such as wood, certain metals, and synthetic organic chemicals. A cloud of combustible dust in the air can explode violently if there is a source of ignition, for example, a naked flame or spark. Gases. Gases such as liquefied petroleum gas, or LPG, are usually stored under pressure in cylinders and bulk containers. Uncontrolled releases can readily ignite or cause the cylinder to become a missile. Solids. Solids include materials such as plastic foam, packaging, and textiles which can burn fiercely and give off dense black smoke which is sometimes poisonous. Gas welding. The flammable gases, for example acetylene or propane and oxygen, used as a fuel for hot work and flame cutting, can give rise to fire and explosion risks on their own without any involvement of any other dangerous or combustible substances. How fire spreads. Once alight, a fire spreads by transferring the heat energy from the flames in 3 different ways: convection, conduction, and radiation. Convection is where hot air and gases rise due to the heat produced from the fire. As the hot air rises, cool air comes in from the sides to take its place. This sets up a circulating flow of air which raises the temperature sufficiently to ignite other materials and can transport burning embers to other locations, thus spreading the fire away from the source. Conduction. This is the passage of heat energy through or within a material due to direct contact. For example, metal pipes are heated by the flames, and after a while the heat will travel along the pipes, and in time there will be sufficient heat transfer to ignite any combustible items in contact with those pipes. And radiation. This is the only type of heat energy that can transfer through a vacuum of space. Radiated heat is emitted in all directions. It is unnoticed until it makes contact with an object. Burning buildings can radiate heat to surrounding structures, sometimes even passing through glass windows and igniting the objects inside. Convection, conduction, and radiation will factor into how every fire spreads. Understanding how fire spreads is important so that you can follow the safety rules we will discuss later in this video. The use of fire extinguishers and classifying fire. A large part of knowing which fire extinguisher is suitable for which application is to have an understanding of the different types of fire. Fires are generally classified into 6 categories. These refer to the material that is burning and any accelerants that may be involved. In some cases, only one specific fire extinguisher will be appropriate for the type of fire. There are 5 main types of fire extinguisher. A colour bar at the top of the fire extinguisher will denote its type. These are water. Water has a red colour bar. Water has a great effect on cooling surfaces and thereby reducing the chemical decomposition rate of the fuel. A 9-litre total discharge water extinguisher will last for approximately 60 seconds and is effective from a distance of 4 to 6 metres. Dry powder. This has a blue colour bar. These work by smothering the fire. By putting a layer of powder on the fire, it cuts the fuel off from the oxygen around it and the fire goes out. A 5 kilogram total discharge dry powder extinguisher will last for approximately 16 seconds and is effective from a distance of 6 metres. Carbon dioxide. This has a black colour bar. Carbon dioxide extinguishers work by suffocating the fire. Carbon dioxide displaces the oxygen in the air. This type of extinguisher also has a cooling effect. However, please note that once discharged, the CO2 will disperse quickly and allow access for oxygen once again. This can then reignite the fire. Be aware there is a danger of suffocation if a carbon dioxide fire extinguisher is used in a confined space. A 2 kilogram total discharge CO2 extinguisher will last for approximately 12 seconds and is effective from a distance of 0.5 to 1 metre. Foam spray has a cream colour bar. These are mainly water-based with a foaming agent, allowing the foam to break the interaction between the flames and the fuel surface. A 5-litre total discharge foam extinguisher will last for approximately 32 seconds and is effective from a distance of 4 to 6 metres. And finally, wet chemical. This has a yellow colour bar. These extinguishers are designed for use on fires involving cooking oils, fats and similar substances. They spray the agent out as a fine mist which acts to cool the flame front, while the chemical reacts to form a soap-like solution, sealing the surface and preventing reignition. This provides a similar blanketing effect to the foam extinguisher, but with a greater cooling effect. A 6-litre total discharge wet chemical extinguisher will last for approximately 43 seconds and is effective from a distance of 4 metres. In terms of classifying fire, there are 6 categories to consider. They are: Class A. Fires involving freely burning materials such as cardboard, wood, paper and textiles. These fires can be tackled by using water, foam, dry powder and wet chemical extinguishers. Class B. These fires involve flammable liquids such as petrol, diesel, thinners and paints. These types of fire can be tackled using foam, dry powder or CO2 extinguishers. Class C. Fires involving flammable gases such as acetylene, propane, butane and methane. These can be tackled using dry powder extinguishers. However, please be aware that as most gases are heavier than air, there is a risk of gas pooling at lower levels, such as in pits and drains. This gas can then be reignited and cause an explosion. Extinguishing the flames of this type of fire could be potentially dangerous unless the gas supply can be isolated. Class D. Fires involving burning metals such as aluminium, magnesium and titanium. These can be tackled using dry powder extinguishers. Fires involving electrical equipment such as photocopiers, fax machines, computers and electrical tools. These can be tackled using CO2 or dry powder extinguishers. However, dry powder may leave a residue that can damage electrical equipment. And finally, Class F. Fires involving cooking oils and fats such as olive oil, lard and butter. These can be tackled using wet chemical extinguishers. As a general rule, when operating a fire extinguisher, remember the acronym PASS. P. Pull out the pin. A. Aim at the base of the fire. S. Squeeze the trigger. And S. Sweep back and forth at the base of the fire. You may be able to extinguish a small fire by using the fire extinguishers provided. However, you should only attempt to do this if you know what you are doing and you are trained to do so. You should make sure that you have a safe escape route. Use common sense. If it's not safe, make sure you get out and stay out. Now let's think about fire safety signs and notices. You need to familiarise yourself with the following types of signs. The prohibition sign. This means you must not do. For example, no smoking. Such signs are displayed on a white background with a red circle and a black image with a red line going through the middle. The warning or caution sign. These types of sign advise you to be aware of, for example, danger, this is an explosive atmosphere. This sign is displayed on a white background with a black triangle and a yellow insert. The mandatory sign. You must follow the instruction given, for example, fire door, keep shut. This type is displayed on a blue background. The mandatory or must-do requirement will be highlighted in white. And finally, information signs, for example, fire exit. Information signs are displayed on a green background. These signs indicate a safe system or safe exit route. Remember, fire exit signs should be clearly visible in an emergency to aid rapid evacuation and avoid panic and confusion. Now let's think about examples of controls your employer may have put in place to prevent you and others from being harmed by fire. Fire wardens. These people are specifically appointed to take control of fire situations and help get everyone out safely. Fire alarms or other fire warning systems. These come in the form such as rotary gongs, air horns, and automatic fire detection devices like smoke detectors, and they enable quick identification of fires, thus allowing the fire to be tackled and people to get away from the fire to a place of safety. Firefighting equipment, such as fire extinguishers, hose reels, fire blankets, etc. Fire drills. Essentially, fire drills are rehearsals of the company fire procedure. The objective of a fire drill is so people know what to do if there is a fire and where the nearest fire exits, assembly points, or safe places are located. Emergency lighting. There are generally two types of emergency lighting, commonly known as maintained and non-maintained units. Maintained units operate at all times. Non-maintained units only operate when normal lighting fails. Training and information, just like this video here, so that you are made more aware of how to prevent fires and what to do if there is a fire. Evacuation routes. These allow people to safely exit the building. Regular checks. For example, of the fire alarm and detection systems, emergency lighting and fire doors to ensure they are in good working order. And finally, a fire emergency plan, which is a written procedure outlining the duties of all staff in the event of a fire. Having considered the types of fire safety controls employers put in place, it's important to understand when we should raise the alarm. It really is quite simple. The fire alarm should be raised when you see flames, you see smoke, you smell smoke, you feel heat, you hear someone shout fire, and finally, when you are told to do so. But if raising the alarm is so simple, then why do people hesitate? Let's think about the types of behaviour that may prevent us from raising the alarm. Panic, fear of the fire, fear of disciplinary action from activating the alarm. It's too dangerous to raise the alarm. We think that we can deal with the fire ourselves. We may be responsible for starting the fire. Fear of looking foolish if it turns out to be a false alarm. Believing that it's not worth troubling the emergency services. And fear of disruption to the company and to the fire service. Any one of the factors just mentioned can dictate how we behave in a fire situation. And just as we may hesitate to raise the alarm, there are critical factors that come into play that dictate why we should try to tackle the fire. These include instinctive reaction, to avoid activating the alarm. We may want to be a hero. We think there is little risk. We think the fire is contained. We think the fire can be put out. It's not worth calling the emergency services, and to cover up actions that may have started the fire. So, what should you do if you discover a fire? By nature, fire is very unpredictable, and you never know exactly when a fire might break out. You can, however, take steps to ensure that you know what to do, so if the worst does happen, you'll be ready to act. Of course, different premises will have different fire threats and specific safety procedures associated with them, so you should always familiarise yourself with the company's fire emergency plan or procedure, the escape routes, the assembly points, the location of the firefighting equipment, and how it is to be used. The following tips are a general guide to what you should do if you discover a fire. However, you should always check your company's fire emergency plan, as there may be specific requirements that differ to the advice given. Tip 1. Remember to stay calm and think logically about what you need to do. This is critical to your safety and that of those around you. Panicking will only make the situation worse. Tip 2. You need to raise the alarm by alerting people in the immediate area, and if fitted, activating the fire alarm from the nearest fire alarm call point, or red box. Many fire alarm systems will have automatic fire detection in the form of smoke and/or heat detectors. Others will require you to break the glass of a manual call point. Some smaller buildings may not have a fire alarm. In these cases, there will usually be an alternative means of raising the alarm. For example, a self-contained howler, such as a rotary gong or air horn. Tip 3. Dial the fire surface, but make sure you do this from a safe location. If you can't dial the fire surface, then get someone else to do it. Time is critical when dealing with fire, so you must act fast. Tip 4. If there is any equipment that could cause major safety issues if left running during a fire, shut it down, but only if it is safe to do so. If this is not possible, you should notify the fire service immediately upon their arrival. Tip 5. You may be able to extinguish small fires by using the firefighting equipment provided. Only do this if you know what you are doing and are trained to do so, and make sure you have a safe escape route. Use common sense. If it is not safe, make sure you get out and stay out. Tip 6. Before you attempt to fight a fire, it's very important to check that the type of fire extinguisher that you plan to use is suitable for the type of fire. There should be information to help you on the extinguisher itself and signage placed near the area that the extinguisher is located. Tip 7. Use caution. If you don't know how to use a fire extinguisher safely, then it's probably best not to. Tip 8. If you've used up a whole fire extinguisher and the flames are still not out, then the fire is too big for you to put out safely. You must leave the building immediately. Tip 9. Make your way to your designated fire assembly point and report to the person taking the roll call. Do not delay. End phone calls politely but immediately. Do not stop to save work or to collect personal belongings. On your way out, if you are the last person to leave the room or are in the corridor, close the doors behind you if it is possible to do so. This will limit the oxygen supply and thus the spread of the flames. Tip 10. Always use the stairs in the event of a fire and never use the lift. Many lifts automatically stop working and return to the ground floor when the fire alarm system is triggered. Tip 11. If you believe that someone is still trapped inside the building, check with the fire wardens and then inform the fire emergency services. Under no circumstances should you re-enter the building until the emergency services have told you that it is safe to do so. And finally, tip 12. Don't be a hero. The emergency services people are specially trained and have the appropriate equipment to rescue people from burning buildings. If you fail to take notice of this point, you may actually put your own life and others in serious danger. So what can you and your colleagues do to reduce the risk of fire at your place of work? There are a number of ways that you can help reduce the risk of fire and keep people safe should a fire occur. Some of these will be specific to particular departments, whilst others will apply to every department on site. Here are the do's and don'ts of fire safety. Do keep emergency exits, escape routes and fire extinguishers free from obstructions. Do report any damaged fire exit doors, emergency lighting or missing fire extinguishers. Do practice good housekeeping at all times. For example, avoid the build-up of rubbish that could burn. Do use a proprietary fuel retriever or adapter when draining fuel from tanks and lines. Make sure the vehicle and the retriever are both earthed. Do drain fuel outdoors or in a well-ventilated area. Do keep the tops or lids on containers of highly flammable liquids. Do store containers of highly flammable liquids in a safe place, in the open air or in a suitable storeroom. Do fit flashback arresters for both the fuel, for example propane or acetylene, and oxygen gas cylinder regulators. For longer lengths of hose, also fit them to the blowpipe. Do store gas cylinders in a safe, well-ventilated space, preferably outside. Do dispose of contaminated cloths or rags safely, for example, in a lidded metal bin. Do keep airbags and seatbelt pretensioners in secure containers. Do use tools with built-in extraction or local exhaust ventilation when sanding organic body fillers. Don't block fire exits or escape routes. Don't wedge fire doors open. Don't drain fuel over or close to a pit or a drain. Don't allow work that can produce a source of ignition, such as welding, burning, electrical or other hot work, to be carried out while removing fuel. Don't allow smoking in any area while fuel is being removed. Don't use any electrical equipment on or near the vehicle while fuel draining is in progress. This includes the use of inspection lamps, cordless phone handsets, mobile phones and pagers. Don't drain fuel into open-topped containers such as buckets and watering cans. Don't drain fuel into waste oil tanks. Don't drain fuel into dedicated oil draining equipment. Don't carry out welding or other hot work on fuel tanks or on wheels with inflated tyres. Don't spray highly flammable liquid paints in the open workshop or where there is a risk of fire or explosion. Don't use fuel or solvents to light rubbish. Don't charge batteries above manufacturer's recommendations. The role of the fire warden. The role of the fire warden, or fire marshal as they are sometimes called, is to promote fire safety in the workplace. To do this, they will often need to liaise with other persons on site, for example, work colleagues, other fire wardens, and the responsible person, that is the person on site who is responsible for fire safety. A fire warden's roles and responsibilities fall broadly into two categories. Firstly, proactive day-to-day duties, and secondly, reactive emergency duties. Let's think about proactive day-to-day duties. A fire warden must not put themselves at risk while carrying out their duties. However, they are essentially there to help reduce the risk of fire in the workplace. Agreed responsibilities may differ from organisation to organisation, and this can depend upon various issues: the number of staff on site, the size of the building, the contents of the building, and the number of visitors on site. As an example, fire warden duties in the workplace may include introducing themselves as the fire warden to all new members of staff and checking that new members of staff are aware of and understand the fire safety procedures. Carrying out periodic fire alarm call point tests and checking that the fire alarms and other means of raising the alarm can be heard in all areas. Carrying out periodic emergency lighting tests and checking that emergency routes and exits are adequately lit in the case of failure of normal lighting. Checking that fire exit doors are free from obstructions. This includes inside and outside the building, and that the doors operate correctly. Checking that fire doors are not wedged open. Checking that fire protection equipment is correctly located and maintained. Checking escape routes are free from obstruction. Checking that fire signage is clearly visible and easy to understand. Checking that general housekeeping is in good order. For example, bins are not full with paper and cardboard. Checking smoking areas are controlled. For example, they are kept clean and bins or other receptacles for smokers' materials are emptied on a regular basis. checking that work colleagues are following safe working practices, arranging fire drills at least once a year and checking the fire assembly point is clear and easily identifiable, and finally, helping to identify fire hazards in the workplace. Now let's consider reactive fire warden duties. Whilst the main role of the fire warden is proactive fire prevention, at times fire warden duties are reactive. These responsibilities may include assisting with the fire evacuation and carrying out a sweep or thorough check of their designated area, including checking toilets and stockrooms for persons trapped or who have not yet been evacuated. Checking any safe refuges for disabled persons in case someone is waiting for evacuation assistance. Fighting the fire with an extinguisher, but only if trained to do so and it is safe to do so and without increasing the risk to themselves or others. Where possible, ensuring hazardous manufacturing processes and machinery have been isolated. Where possible, ensuring doors and windows are closed as the building is evacuated, as this will contain the spread of fire, heat and smoke. Liaising and coordinating with the person in charge at the assembly point, checking that all persons, including employees and visitors, have been evacuated from the building. And finally, ensuring that the emergency services have been called and liaising with the fire and rescue service, particularly if the fire is within their area of responsibility. Fire legislation. The Regulatory Reform Fire Safety Order covers general fire safety in England and Wales. The Fire Safety Regulations Northern Ireland cover the Northern Ireland area, whilst in Scotland, requirements on general fire safety are covered in Part 3 of the Fire Scotland Act, which is supported by the Fire Safety Scotland regulations. In the majority of premises, local fire and rescue authorities are responsible for enforcing the safety legislation. Let's take a moment to consider the duties of both the employer and the employee in terms of fire safety law. Your employer is required to carry out a fire risk assessment, put in place suitable arrangements for fire safety, and provide relevant information, instruction and training to employees as covered later in this video. As an employee, you are required to take reasonable care of your safety and that of others who may be affected by your acts or omissions, cooperate with your employer as necessary, inform your employer of any work situation which could be a serious and immediate danger to fire safety, and to inform your employer of any shortfalls in training and instruction regarding fire protection arrangements. So what happens if it all goes wrong? Here are some examples of the devastating effects of fire.